Yeah, it is to a large extent because the port trust now what they are planning to do is to have this port trust, free this land and have other types of housing there or use it for other purposes. So the main thing is that the port trust had some industrial activities, PPT lands, like you had big companies there, and now with the trend of let's say of contract labor and casual labor, you don't have many permanent workers working there. So most of these contract labor or casual labor, they reside in the slums which are nearby. After all, slum dwellers, people who are homeless, they don't pick up any area just because it is open and space is available there. They also have their own choices. They would look at areas where they can get, which is close to their place of work, so that they don't have to commute there. So they spend less money in commuting. This is how the urban poor works and contributes to the city. Because on one side you have slums, which is cheap housing, which the government should have done. The workers are using their own resources to create their housing spaces. And then they walk or whatever they do, or they cycle down to their place of work, so they don't have to pay for transport. Then also, you have cheap goods given by street vendors and others. So all this, what does it mean? That they can sell their labor power at a cheaper rate. So who benefits? The those who buy their labor power. So that's why you have such low rates in Mumbai, the wage rates, given the city, the cost of living here. People can afford because of these reasons, So actually, their offering the work cheap it is not that they can live under any circumstances, but it's also it helps the. So you find everywhere the new workers in the port areas. It's not just the BPT; they are all temporary workers. They need not be contract workers, but they are temporary workers. You can see them in the case of the shipbuilding industry, because whenever orders come, there's a boom. So for the next, they need extra workers, say 20,000, 30,000 for the next 2-3 years. So they're not going to appoint permanent workers. They will appoint contract workers. So some of them say that they pay them the same rates as the permanent workers. But anyway, this is a temporary job, and people know that this is not a lifetime occupation. That's why this is one part, of the port land, and I think that's why the slums have come up here in these areas. They're all linked up with activities around that area, with economic activities which are there. In Darukhana, we found that we'd done a survey incidentally earlier for Mazgaon Dock for looking at this area there, these same areas which are being demolished. Where we found that all these people, they had links. Powder Bandar also, they are working as casual labor in the nearby areas. Darukhana especially is very important because of the shipbreaking industry. And a lot of things, there are also not just the number of people who work there as casual labor in the shipbreaking industry, but also the type of byproducts which come out. So there are these small factories, there are also these sort of outlets, which sell these products. So you have everything, there. And so it becomes a sort of a very integrated economic activity, which actually helps the urban poor. But more than that, it also creates markets for the other sections in society. So I think this is a very, very important thing. And that's why slums should not be looked just as eyesores. They are eyesores, let's see very clearly, that nobody would like to live in slums because they don't have facilities. They don't have water, they don't have electricity, and even if they do, it might be illegal connections. They don't, and most of all, they don't have toilet facilities. So nobody would willingly live in a slum. So the only way out would be to upgrade the slums and provide them these facilities. Why should you only think in terms of removing them and putting them into 5-story, 50-story buildings, which will be of no use to them? So I think, even in that sense, what is happening in PPT lands, the minister might talk about 5-story or having slum redevelopment programs, but we don't know how successful it will be. Because this comes directly, this Bombay Port Trust, there are different stakeholders there. And this is supposed to be a trust in an autonomous body. And the trust has rightly said that they don't come under any of the state laws. They have their own laws. So there's going to be a conflict there. So one doesn't know. But the only thing which has happened, the positive side for BPT is that the minister announcing and the others saying that the land is going to be free gives them the right to remove people from there, and so that they can do it. So that they have now the right, because earlier now it means that they can use the land, or they can give permission to use the land in whatever way they want or what will be beneficial to them. So which means the poor who have really developed the land. That's another point one thing. Slums come up in semi-developed or undeveloped land. The people who reside in the slums, when they set up their houses, they develop this place earlier with their labor power, which is free, given free. They level the land so that they can build their shanties down. And after that, the shanties are demolished and is handed on a silver platter to the builders and others who don't have to spend that much money in developing the land. So it's all a nexus. So if I look at it in this way, let me see how much the urban poor is contributing to the development of the city. Even through demolitions, if I look at it that way, that they have made the way for other builders to come who could have easily afforded to pay for this land. So, the point which is very important is not just for BPT, for the city as a whole, is that the urban poor plays a very crucial role in the development of the cities. Today, if you're going to throw these people out of Bombay, of the Port Trust land, tomorrow there will be a crisis in terms of minor services and all which are required. They can't do without that. The people who will be occupying these huge houses and all, they will not be able to work without, say, domestics and all that. And where will they get these people? If they're thrown out of it. So it's also, it is a sort of a symbiotic relationship is there. But I think the only way out would be to operate these lands. And you see, no slum dweller wants land which is free of cost. At least that's what I've heard. That's what most NGOs who are working with slum lands, among slum dwellers, they say, that they never wanted free housing. But that has been thrust on them, which means that they have no control over the houses which are being built. If they paid something for it, at least they could talk about it. The only people who say that this is wrong in all slum dwellers are the corporate people. Who say that, no, that's true and they want a big thing out of it. They should be denied them free land and all that, or free places to stay. But the point is that they don't want it. So if you upgrade their land, they're not interested in living in filth. But but the question is also of their livelihood. If that is taken away and they are given housing somewhere else, they will come back to the slums. And then we will again say, look, this is how these fellows are. They love living in slums. They don't like proper housing. We'll just say that. That will be our. Not our. The middle class stand. That these people don't deserve proper housing. I'd like to say that the informalization of labour has started, let us say, from the 1980s, after the mill started closing down. They say it's a strike, but that's not true. Because the textile mills were operating with obsolete machinery, and if there was no, fortunately it was a protected market, so they could exist. But then they also found that the price of real estate was much more than the price of the mills. So they deliberately shut the mills, but blamed Datta Sama, strike for it. But the fact is that after that, when the 2.5 lakh workers were suddenly disappeared from the scene, what happened was the informal sector started growing in leaps and bounds, and you could find that by 91, that is before globalization started the process, Mumbai's labor force, the 65% of Mumbai's labor force was in the informal sector, whereas earlier it used to be a minority. Now it is the majority of the workers. Now that has gone up to over 70%. So now more than that, about 70-75%. So because no new industries have come up, whatever is there, whatever new jobs are offered are all in the informal sector. And this is true of all existing industries in the city. That includes the Port Trust, which is one of the major employers. Since recruitment has been stopped, but you still require people to work, it's always the informal workers, the contract workers or the casual workers who fill up this need. And those people who are not paid very well and also do not have all the facilities of a permanent worker, say in terms of medical facilities and other things, and also retirement benefits and all other things. Now what happened, then again, I think this is true of all the other infrastructures. It's true. Then the DPT lands, one by one, they like Unilever has closed down its factory, some others, but you have like HPCL, BPCL, they're still there. And also you have the major employment generator, there is the Mazgaon block. There also, there are a large section of workers are in the informal sector. Now what happens is the informal sector workers need to, as I said earlier, they live in the vicinity because of their low wages and other things. So they don't want to go far away where they'll have to spend a lot of money on transport in reaching their places of work. So therefore these slums have come up. So they, in that sense, trying to, it is actually, as I said earlier, that these slums are also resulting in, in making labor cheap, which actually benefits these people who employ them. So that's one part of the thing. So, and in most cases, you see, if you look at the other large ports, it's not just BPT, but you also look at the other large ports, which are there, and the port trusts which are there. They've had a lot of land, and cities have grown around it. Now this land can be used for other purposes, commercial purposes, but the more important thing is that these larger ports, there's tremendous pressure that they should be privatized or they should be what they call PP, public-private partnership, where obviously in such a situation the private sector will have a greater role to play. So they can develop in another way, and obviously these people are not using, not going to help the urban poor to live a more decent life. So again the poor will be left to fend for themselves. The question is that the struggle for existence is so acute that they do find some ways and means of trying to live in this city, and nobody looks at their problems or even tries to assess their contributions to the development of the city. Today the city is what it is because of these, let's say how much, 55% of people who live in slums and about 70% or more who are working in informal employment. So it is true, that, there are other sections also, the homeless, and you have people who are living in chawls who would be, strictly speaking, are not called slums because we refer to slums as these jhopalpattis and other things. So these would be, that would come to a sizable part of the population. And you can't just say that the majority will be thrown out and the minority will rule. This is exactly what happens, that you have an organized minority, who are, represented by these corporate forces and other things. And they are the ones who actually are trying to, are the ones who are trying to impose their ideas on what a city should be. A nice city, a good city should be. So to them, these people who do not constitute, proper housing, who don't have enough water supply and things like that, these people are deterrents to making Mumbai a global city. So many people have also said that it should be renamed as slum name, and all that, slumber. But which may be true, because if 65% of the population lives in slums, 60%, then it is a slum city, and one should recognize that and see how slums can be developed. Now, my own experiences in dealing with this growth of the informal sector, you see that mainly that there are, with the decline in industries, what has happened, that Mumbai is no longer an industrial city. It's mainly, you find the most of the jobs in the services sector, and this sector is also quite it's a sector which doesn't offer permanent employment. They insecure employment there. The services sector would mean things like transport. It would also mean you have a whole lot of new services which have come up, cable TV, courier services. All of them are employing people, but who are these people? Even today, Speed Post, which is a postal department thing. You find these boys, about hardly 18 or 20 or 21-year-old fellows who are paid something like 3,000 or 4,000 rupees a month to do the deliveries. So this is how the whole system works. So people do have jobs, but the jobs are not what we call decent jobs. So that is what is happening in this city. So you have inequalities running to such an extent that a city which has 73% official figures, that is also a bit dated, because they say every time you have a new discount, the figure increases. If this was about 10 years ago, 73% live in one room. and you also have others who have 400 rooms. So I mean, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have 400, but at least these people should have more. And they are also contributing to the city and its development. I think that is what is important. I've seen throughout that, while dealing with say unions and others of the informal sector, now, or dealing with workers who are trying to collectivize, I find there's a systematic way. This is not what we see is not something which happens just like that because of economic reasons. That you don't give them enough wages, don't allow them to stay properly, because we can't afford it. We need cheap workers if you're going to compete globally. It's not just that. There's also a social problem of it. Because most of these people come from, say, marginalized castes. They are Dalits. They're also Muslims who are, let's say, OBC Muslims, who are poor. So these people, so there has to be exploitation. Just doesn't come through wages and poor housing conditions. It also comes to by making them feel that they are not necessary for the city, which makes them much more vulnerable and also fear. And they fear that any time they can be thrown out. And it is through that fear they are willing to do any type of work for whatever wages in order to stay there. So it's not just a question of the economic aspect of it. It's also the social effects which it has. So I think this is where the whole problem comes from. That people are not that they have. If once the informal sector starts articulating their own interest, and one has to be very clear, the ruling forces, whoever they are, whether it's the Bombay Municipal Corporation or others, are bent to see, as you can see in the case of Port Trust, that they are never consulted because they are taken to be idiots and they are recipients. See, when you have a hawkers policy, you never consult the hawkers. Today you have a what is it called? You have a town vending committee, and unions are kept outside. I mean, they are there, but they never consulted. So you have a town vending committee, which means once in 6 months. And municipal officers have told me, senior level people, we don't want these people, unions, because it's better to deal with hawkers individually than to deal with the unions. Because again, the unions represent the collective. So similarly, so in that sense, organization of informal workers becomes necessary if you're going to solve the problem. If you think of elevating. Unfortunately, the unions in the organized sector have not taken much interest because I don't know for various reasons. It could be it's more difficult to organize them than also in terms of money because many of them may not be paying union fees and all that, and the formal sector is much easier to do that. So as a result, many of them ignore the needs of the informal sector workers who are actually working with them side to side in many cases, but they are never taken into account. Now you also have, that's why one can see even in the port trust, the port case, this Portland case, that many of the unions have really not articulated the interests of these who are not just merely slum dwellers, but who are also workers in these organizations. So even as workers, their cases have not been taken up. And perhaps if the unions did expand their activities, then things would have been much better for these people. Would have improved certainly.